There's something all the greatest people in history understood. Something we all know about, but we don't all apply it effectively to the work we do. Practice.
So I remember that I was drawing like morning, during my lunch break, at nighttime. I was spending my whole day drawing and painting, but I wasn't getting better. And I remember that was so frustrating for me because I kept thinking, they say, oh, just the way you get better is just draw as much as you can, draw every day and be consistent. And I'm like, I'm doing this, but I'm not growing. I'm not seeing any growth in my craft. Until I realized I had finally come to the realization that I was spending most, if not all of my time working on like ideas, working on drawing for fun, and spending little to almost no time working on drawing to learn. And unfortunately for me, it took me a really long time to figure out the difference and to figure out that I needed to reverse that. I needed to reverse the amount of time that I spent on drawing for fun versus the amount of time that I spent on drawing to learn. Because for one, I realized that my characters and drawings weren't even turning out the way that I really wanted them to. So, for example, if you think about it like with athletes, they don't get better at the game by just playing more of the game. They get better at the game by doing the drills, doing the practice. And so by now you might be thinking like, oh, okay, so this video is just telling me to practice more. And just hear me out for a second. Because I believe that sometimes we can hear the same thing being said about 100 times. But then we hear somebody else say it in a slightly different way. And then that 101th time that we hear it, that's when it actually sinks in.
So the thing about practice is that I found that when I was learning anatomy, when I was learning color and light, painting techniques, things like that, I was focusing more on understanding what I was doing. I didn't really have the pressure of making a masterpiece because I wasn't working on a masterpiece. I was learning. In a way, you could say I wasn't concerned about making the winning shot because I wasn't playing the game, I was practicing. And I read an article that talked about your brain and your mind and how it works when you're in practice mode versus when you're in performance mode. So if you think about it like this, when your brain is in kind of like practice mode, you're focusing more on understanding how to do something versus when you're in performance mode, you're trying to focus on how to come up with something new, especially for creatives, for artists.
All right, so the tendency is to think that just by drawing often, like as long as I'm drawing every day, then that's practice. But again, if it's not intentional, if you're not sitting down saying, okay, I'm gonna draw hands today, I'm gonna draw arms, anatomy, I'm gonna work on painting, it's not really practice. You're just kind of drawing just for the sake of drawing. It's not purposeful. When you're drawing for practice, you're drawing to try to learn how to do something versus when you're drawing for creativity, you're drawing, trying to come up with something new. So it's two completely different kinds of mindsets. I read in the article that it's almost like your brain is almost like a little coach when you're in practice mode, kind of like telling you, okay, tweak this, adjust that, and you're focusing again just simply on how to do something versus how to come up with something new.
I wanted to do this video because I think that a lot of times, I know it seems super obvious again as I keep saying, oh, so it's just practice. But I think that a lot of times we think that we're practicing when we're actually not. And so you might be thinking, okay, but then what is it that you actually mean? So for example, as an artist, if what you're trying to do is to see growth in your creative journey, what you want to do to be more practical is every morning say, okay, for the next 30 days, every morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to draw, I'm going to work on anatomy. And so I'm going to work on gesture drawing and anatomy and learning the human body. So I'm going to do that for 30 days. Or you might say for the next 30 or 60 days, whatever, I'm just, every moment that I get, like every free moment where I have some free time, instead of sitting down and sketching and trying to come up with a cool character or something like that, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do studies. I'm going to paint, and I'm going to paint from observation, and I'm going to just do studies and I'm going to do that for like 60 days. Or I'm going to take a digital painting course or something online. And here's the important part, because again, I know that a lot of this stuff seems obvious, but I'm going to sign up for a digital painting course, and not only am I going to do all of the lessons, but I'm going to do everything that the instructor is asking me to do, because I think that that right there is the key. A lot of times we say, oh, I don't know, I'm not experiencing growth. And I've had this myself with students where they'll reach out and they'll say, hey, what do you think about this drawing? You know, I've been kind of struggling a little bit. And I'll ask them and I'll say, did you by chance pick up that book that I told you about that kind of goes into this a little bit? And and I'll get the response where it's like, oh, well, no, I haven't seen the book yet. I haven't gotten it yet. I've been busy and haven't had time to kind of, do these practices and things like that. And that right there is the key. Again, I think that a lot of times we fool ourselves into thinking, well, as long as I'm drawing and painting all the time, then I'm good. And this is what I'm trying to kind of explain in this video, is that drawing and painting, I'm obviously all for that, for being experimental, for exploring ideas and coming up with some cool new concepts. But if you don't factor in and carve out the time, a good amount of time, to really learn how to master your craft, to really learn how to understand color and light, to understand drawing, fundamentals of drawing, it's going to be hard to experience growth. And a lot of times, this kind of reminds me of, even as a Christian, I feel like a lot of times, I've even had this where my pastor will say, okay, well, I'm asking for advice. And then my pastor might say, well, give me some advice. And then months later, and I have like family members who've experienced the same thing. Months later, you come back and you're kind of struggling with maybe the same kind of thing, or you're trying to figure something out. You're trying to figure something out relationally or something, anything in your life. And then the pastor will say, well, did you do the last thing that I told you? And then your response, is, I haven't done that yet. And I think that that's what happens with this, with our craft, with our working to get better at something, is that we don't want to do the drills. We want to get straight into the game. I want to take that 3-point shot, that winning shot. I don't want to do like drills. I don't want to run up and down the court. I don't want to practice my layups with my left hand. I don't want to do those things. I just want to get right into the game. And it's hard to have confidence. It's hard to get into the game and play with excellence if you haven't first done the drills. And so as basic as this may seem, a video on practice, this is something I really wanted to cover, because I think that, again, it's something that I myself will admit to having had kind of wrestled with in the past. And it wasn't until I kind of got through this that I was able to see breakthrough. Yeah. Even the greatest of ideas will fall flat without proper execution, and proper execution is often a result of purposeful practice. This reminds me when I first came to my faith as a Christian. I remember reading my Bible, but not really understanding what I was reading. I remember, it was like different translations were kind of harder to read. And then I realized, there's some that I can read where I could actually understand the words a little bit more. And then I started to be more intentional with what I was reading, the order that I was reading in. And that really started to help me grow in my faith. And I realized that the growth was a result of the understanding. In other words, in understanding what I was reading, really starting to understand it, versus just reading it often, in really understanding those words that were coming off of the page, that's where I was really starting to experience growth. The answer is usually much simpler than what we think. When I finally started to implement this in my career as an artist, in terms of practice, I think it was maybe about 1.5 years that I really devoted to practicing and growing. I took courses online. I did everything that the instructor asked me to do. I did the gesture drawing classes. I was going to live figure drawing classes. I was doing all of these things, and as I said earlier, I reversed that. The amount of time that I was spending practicing versus the amount of time that I was spending trying to come up with a cool character or something was flipped. And that's when I experienced like really big growth in my work, to the point where it was a result. It was soon after that where I had finally landed my first concept art job. And it was right shortly after that year and a half that I spent so much time working on my craft. And my career changed after that. Thankfully, like so many doors, so many opportunities started to open after that. And so I believe that the same thing can happen for you. I do hope that this video encouraged and blessed you. I hope that it kind of gave you some clarity on what you can do as an artist to really set some purposeful goals for your creative journey ahead of you. And I pray that you experience breakthrough and growth. Keep the fire alive, my friends.
Supposed to miss. Can you believe it? I'm trying to miss. All right, come on.